Alright guys, we're getting close to the end, unfortunately. We have, like, including today, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 class periods. So 4 after today. What I'd like to do, what I'm thinking about, is making it so project is optional, but if you don't do it, or you have to take the final, that kind of implies something too, right? If you do a project and it is deemed good, you know, it compiles, it runs, it's kind of near what you said it was going to do, then you can skip the final. Which means I will probably be kind of generous on grading the finals, right? I'm not going to do it to where, okay, you only got, you know, 3/4 of the project done, I give you a 75, so you got a 75 on the final. I think that would kind of stink. So what we'll do is, if you get a good job, if you get in the right ballpark on the project, then you can skip the final if you're happy with just using your midterm grade as your final grade. You know, I guess you haven't taken your midterm yet. Hopefully you'll do it this Thursday. You know, if you rock the midterm, you take, you know, you make a 90 and you want to make a 90 on your final, great. So, skip the final means using your current test and quiz average as your final exam average as well. If you don't like your quiz and exam average, you'll want to take it anyways, even though you did the project. Or you skip the project and you take the final, right? So it's one or the other. Do the project or take the final. Hope that makes sense. Come to my Java class on Thursday. I've forgotten the room number. It's right over here. From us, 218. If you want to take the final in an in-class setting.
What time?
Same time.
5:40.
The testing is due this Thursday night, right?
Right, it's Thursday night.
And we can do it at the testing center anytime till then?
Well, anytime before then or after then, we can look at the range of dates that I posted.
And you can use your book in the testing center?
You can use your book at the testing center
If you have a physical book.
if you have a physical textbook.
Is it really, do you really need the book?
Well, you also have access to that online textbook.
Oh,
So, I mean, you know, the web page that we've been hitting. You can use that one too. So,
but I mean,
I wouldn't bother. I mean, you're pretty much going to know this stuff if you've been doing the homework,
Okay.
right? I wouldn't sweat it too much. So, come to class on 2/15 on April 12th if you want to do it in a class. You'll just have to ignore me droning on about Java. So if you can go la 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 or listen to headphones or something, I don't care. You better not use headphones because they have to be awfully quiet to not disturb other people. But anyways, okay. I've had a few people say they want to do that. That's totally cool. If you've emailed me about a project and I haven't responded to say it's good, go ahead and upload it into the project Dropbox, right? Say this is what I want to do instead of that one that's listed there. Okay, I think that covers everything. We'll still have 4 class periods after this. What I want to cover between now and the end of the semester is I want at least 2 weeks on, you know, HTML and JavaScript. 3 would be perfect. Hoping we can get there, because the 3rd class, what I want to do is I want to use Python as a web server so that we could show writing client-side programming rather than, server-side programming rather than client-side programming. Now, in the real world, do many people use Python as their web server? No, but the idea is very similar, right? You're going to write modules that serve up web pages and modify the data on the way to its user, and that could be written in Python, it could be written in Java, C#, you know, all sorts of scripting languages. So that's one of the things I want to cover. JavaScript, HTML, like using Python as a web server, as server side. Okay. Then GUI programming. I want to hit dictionaries again. And then file IO again. Is there anything else? It's going to be a lot. Something's bugging me. Anyways, we're going to work on dictionaries today.
Okay, we haven't done dictionaries yet.
We touched on it.
Yeah, we've probably only touched on it. Oh, and by file IO access, the other thing I want to do is directory access via the operating system. So I'm thinking that we're going to do that one today, and yeah, GUI programming is fun. I'm hoping we get to do like just a little bit of it so that the next time we come in, but we'll see. We've got an hour left. Let's see what happens. Alrighty, so dictionaries. The idea behind a dictionary is that they are keys and values, right? You have a key, you have a value. And so instead of doing something like this, where you have list subscript 0 is equal to Bob. Pardon me? I hope I started the video.
Yeah, you started.
Yay! Alrighty, I'm feeling good. Okay. And then, you set the next element in the list equal to 1, or somebody else's name, whatever. Instead, here, our key is an index number. If you're going to access it, you have to pick one, which is a valid key. Anywhere between 0 and the length of the list minus 1. Now that's for lists. For dictionaries, dictionary, Bob, and his email address is bob@gmail.com. And then D subscript Sue, her email address is sue@hotmail.com. All right, so anytime you want to retrieve something out of a list, you have to use the index value. If you're going to retrieve something out of a dictionary, you use the key value. But the key can be pretty much anything.
Don't dictionaries use the curly brackets instead of the square ones?
Not for accessing them.
Okay.
For defining them, yes.
Okay.
So if I was going to make my dictionary, that makes an empty dictionary. If I was going to create a dictionary that was pre-filled with data, I would also use curly braces. So that's just like doing this. Also, if you feel like it, you will see this all over the net, probably from Python 2, like that. They do the same thing.
Python's the only one that has dictionaries, right?
No. Pretty much all the languages that have nice libraries will have dictionaries, except they'll call them different things.
Okay.
Java has oh gosh, I forget the name of them. They're effectively dictionaries, and there's two kinds. There's one that is sorted, and then there's one that's unsorted. And the sorted one is nice because if you traverse it, it spits the keys back in order, which is pretty nice. The unsorted one saves the program time, the insertions time, by not having to maintain, a sorted index. Wish I could remember the name. I'm probably going to be teaching it on Thursday, and I can't remember the name. Anyways, so that's the idea behind a dictionary. And then later on, if you want to get that person's email address, ADDIE is equal to D, followed by, their name. If we set their name equal to Bob, we could get out Bob's email address. What happens if we access a key that doesn't exist? It would go kablooey, just like if you access something out of range on a list. So if we did this, ADDIE is equal to, our dictionary, and then we said somebody who wasn't in the list, that would not work. But you can check to see if it's in there. The same syntax that you use for lists, if Sue is in the dictionary, then you can get the address out. So dictionaries store key values pairs. Now I would strongly recommend making all your keys the same data type But in this weirdo language, you wouldn't have to. C#, Java, yeah, you'd want to do that. So what I want to do today is make it so that we could do something to this effect. I want to count the letters, each letter. Well, let's do this. If I add Bob to it, and then I add Sam to it, and then I add Bob to it again, and then I add Joe to it, what I want to be able to find out is that after I add Bob to it once, there's one Bob in the dictionary. And then after I add Sam to it, there's one Sam in the dictionary. But after I add Bob to it again, there's two of them. Now that's not the way dictionaries work. The way dictionaries work is just like a list, right? Once you replace list item 1, it's gone and then replaced. Same is true of dictionaries. If I went down here and did dictionary Bob and he changed his email address, you know, he's going to Rose now. Bob at, rose.edu. Then that's our key and that's our value. And there's no way to retrieve this anymore, right? It's just gone. But I don't want to do that this time. I want to keep track of what's known as a histogram. Each time we add Bob to it, I want to update this number. And, and so on. If I add Joe a second time, then I want the count of Joe to be 2. If I add Bob a third time, like that. And then when I printed it out, I would want to see that Bob appeared in there 3 times, Joe appeared in there 2 times. Something's messed up. And Sam appeared in there 1 time. That's what I want to be able to do with my dictionary. How am I going to do that? This is going to be the key right there. That's going to be the value. So roughly speaking, the key is equal to the name, and the value is the number of times it's been added. So what we're going to do is when we want to add to the dictionary, we're going to do something like this. If the key is in the dictionary, get the value out, the count is equal to dictionary for that specific key, add 1 to it, and then store it back. Now you could do this in a single line of code. Else, just set it 1 time. I've goofed up there. Okay, there. As soon as I finish typing, I'll go back and say it again. Else, dictionary for this specific key is equal to 1. Maybe I'm going to reverse the logic. Maybe I'm going to say if key in D, if not key in D. So that I can push this one up here and then put this stuff underneath the else. Hope that makes sense. So what are we doing? When I want to add whatever, when I want to add Bob to it, key is equal to Bob, we're going to check the dictionary. Is Bob in the dictionary? Well, if not key in D, he's not in the dictionary, so we're going to set his value equal to 1. He appears 1 time now. Else, we're going to find out how many times he's appeared previously. So count is equal to the value that's associated with that key. Maybe 1. We've added it 1 time. And then we're going to add 1 to that count, and then we're going to assign that back to the dictionary for that key. And so the more that we added for the same key, the larger the value that would be associated with it. And so that would create a histogram. Let's play with that, because now that you've seen this code, it's not going to be hard to recreate that in idle, just expand it just a wee bit. So where am I going with this? New file, April 10. So I want to create an empty dictionary. Then I want a loop, asking the user for names, adding each one to the dictionary, using that logic that I had on the other page. And then printing out the dictionary each time. Or maybe we want to wait until the end, but let's just print out the dictionary en masse at the beginning. So this is going to be the complex one, right? We know how to ask the user for names. We know how to print something. We just print, the dictionary name, and the format's going to be ugly, but it would dump it to the screen. So, empty dictionary. I'm going to call it H for histogram. Or maybe I'll be not lazy and actually use the word hist. Hist is equal to that. That's an empty dic. Now I'm always hesitate before I do a while true loop. I'm going to do a while true loop. All right, while true. We're going to ask for the name. Name is equal to input, enter name, or Q to quit. And hopefully we're not in a Star Trek universe where there is somebody named Q. So here we go. If name does equal Q, then break, right? That gets us out of the while loop. Else we want to add it to the list. I'm just going to leave that as a comment for now, because that was hard. Not really. Add to dict. Add to hist. And then we're going to print the hist out. So I'm just going to type print hist. Right now it's an empty dictionary. There's nothing in it. And then maybe I'll throw in a print done at the bottom, just so that we know we quit. All right, I'm going to run it as is, and it's not going to do a darn thing. It's just going to keep asking names, because we don't have this code yet. We aren't adding anything to the histogram. All right, enter name, Joe, Bob. We can see it's an empty dictionary, which is to be expected, because, right, that's just a comment there. So now we have to do that business about checking to see if our key is in the dictionary. If it is, we want to get the count out, increment that count, and put it back in. And maybe we'll just do it in one line rather than the 3 lines because it's easier to type. I just hope you remember this syntax here, because we're going to collapse that into one line. Not hard. Alrighty. So if the key, if not key in hist, we better put it in there. Hist subscript key, square braces key, is equal to 1. It appears one time in our dictionary now. Or I should say we have encountered it one time. It always appears just once. I think we ought to put a comment up at the very top that what this dictionary is going to keep track of is key equals the name or whatever word, and the value equals the count. In other words, a histogram. Just so that if I look at this in the far future, and I actually do go back and look at this stuff, like the next time I teach this, I may look at this, because I customize them each time. Last time that I did the file I/O, the directory access one, it took like 5 pages of code to type in, and I shortened it to 1 for this time. Anyways, let's just not waste all of our time typing stuff in. Okay, let's run it now. We don't have the else yet, right? But we have something that's going to set the values to 1. So I'm going to run it and type some names. Frodo, and it blows up. What did I do wrong?
You haven't defined key.
I never defined key. Instead, I used name. So it should be if not name in hist. Histogram name. Make sure you correct those two things. Or I could have just done key is equal to name. Our key is the name. All right. I've scrolled up and down and added things, so I do want to make sure that everybody is caught up. But I want to get here. Bob, Sam. See, each time I add one to the dictionary, but if I type in Bob again, it doesn't get updated to 2 because I haven't added that else clause. And then Joe, great. Type in Joe again, it's still stuck at 1. Q for quit. All right. So that much code is working. And I want to make sure it's working for everybody before we go on. Alrighty, so the else clause for this if. This showed how to do it, with 3 statements. What would we have to fix? That was the name of our dictionary. We have to call it hist. Our key was our name. We'd have to replace that variable. But I want to just do it with 1. Save ourselves some typing. So else colon, the histogram, the dictionary entry for that key is equal to the histogram entry, the dictionary entry for that value plus 1, right? The value already exists, 1, and so we're going to pull it out, add 1 to it, and store it back in there. So the first time we add something, it's going to be 1. Then the second time, it's going to update that 1 to a 2. And then it's going to update that, 2 to a 3. And the reason that that works is that for any dictionary, you can only, the keys are unique. If you put something in there with the same key, it overrides the value. It doesn't append it to the dictionary where you have several keys with the same value. All right, that should do it. That should do it. Enter name, Sam. We've got 1 Sam. Frodo, Gandalf. Now I'm going to add Sam again. Okay, and see, there it goes. We have 2 Sams. We really like Sam, so we add him a 3rd time, and then we quit. So we have our histogram data set. Now it's kind of ugly. What do I mean by that? We'd rather print it as a tidy little list rather than what we have there. We can do that. We could make a function for it, or we could just tack it on right here. Making a function for it would be the nice thing to do. So I guess I will. I'm going to show you some bad programming here. DEF print underscore hist, and I'm not going to pass anything in. Instead, I'm going to use hist as a global variable. Now, when you're going to use a global variable, if you want your if you want your function to be able to change it, you have to use a global keyword. This is just a print function. We don't have to change it. However, I'm going to go ahead and define it as a global variable anyways, just because. It makes it absolutely clear where that variable is coming from. Why do I call this bad programming? Because in general, global variables are in poor taste. Kind of like wearing white after Labor Day or whatever that rule is, I don't know. Okay, so now we just need a loop. There's a couple of different ways of writing a loop that'll pull out the keys and the values that are saved in a list. This one seemed the easiest to understand for me, but you could always Google up traverse Python dictionary and it would tell you. So for every key in d.keys, this is an S here and there's no S here. And usually I avoid doing that because I always have to walk around and remove S's and add S's. Okay, in d.keys, keys is a function that returns a list of every key in that dictionary.
What's the D then?
Good question. Where'd that D come from? That was my example, and that's moronic. Don't type D dot. Delete that D dot and replace it with hist dot. And so now we're going to print out our key followed by the histogram value for that key. And there's no S's here. The only time we had an S after the word key was when we were calling the keys function. Now down at the bottom where I did print parentheses hist, instead do print underscore hist parentheses. So I'm going to scroll down and change that. You see this line here? Print parentheses hist. Just nuke it, delete it, comment it out, whatever you want to do. I'm commenting out, and instead I'm going to call my print hist function. Just to make sure it works. Bob, Sam, Frodo, Bob. All right. So it could be that I wouldn't want to print a histogram until the very end. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to modify this so that it only prints one histogram rather than printing it out every single time. And what change do I need to make in order to get it to print it out when only at the end of the loop?
Take it out of the loop.
Right, I want to remove it from the loop. So I'm just going to unindent it or dedent it. So this guy, now that I just added him, is going to get unindented. And don't always add my comments. My comments are just to show you what I changed. All right. Bob, Sam, Bob, Sam, Frodo. I should see 3, 2, and 1. It seems to be maintaining the order of insertion, right? Bob was the first one I added, Sam was the second one I added, and Frodo was the third one. Now that Java class that I was talking about that maintains sorted order would have done Bob, Frodo, and Sam, right? Otherwise the order is indeterminate. You have no idea how it's going to be stored. That's bugging the heck out of me that I can't remember. Forget it. It's not coming to me.
Can you have multiple values for each key?
Only if you made a list. You could do this if you wanted to. Dictionary for this key is equal to, and then you make a list, right? You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That'd be a totally legit way of doing it because your value can be anything you want. Yeah. All right, we've gone far enough. So here we're using a dictionary to sort a set of data where the data are disparate objects, right? You know. But you can also do separate attributes for the same piece of data. And I'm just going to show you that real quickly. But, you know, you could have, I'm going to declare an empty object. You don't even have to type this stuff. His name is Joe. His email address is, you know, j@gmail.com. His phone number is equal to whatever, you know, 459, like that. Right. Here we're using this as named attributes of the same object. Now that's kind of a poor man's class, but there may be times when you want to do that. And then you could make a list of dictionaries if you want. You could make somebody else that had different attributes, you know, different values, pairs like that, and you could just add them both to a list if you wanted to process them all. And I had an example like that, but I don't want to take our time to do that. Just know that you could use this to describe separate attributes of one item of data, or you could do a set of data. Set not meaning a Python set, which is a very specific data type, just a collection of data. Alrighty, I'm going to nuke that stuff. I want to move on to our next topic, which is pulling out a list of files, file names, from our current working directory. And I really don't want to have to keep entering names at this point. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the top, give myself a couple of lines, and then just do input, press enter, and then you can always close the window at that point rather than go back down and enter names. So the rest of our code is going to be added to the top above that input, press enter. What I should have done is put these in functions and then gone down and had an, if main and then called the function that I wanted to do. But I didn't, so I'm going to roll with this primitive. So let's import the operating system library. And let's get our current working directory. cwd is equal to os.getcwd. And let's print our current working directory out, just out of curiosity. Should be the directory that our script is stored in. Mine is stored in users, Thompson, desktop, CIT 1203. And there we go. You see, that's my current working directory. Why do I want my current working directory? Because I want to get a directory listing. And when I do a directory listing, I need to specify the directory that I want. I could probably use a dot as my current working directory. That concept will not be familiar to a lot of you, but if you're at a command prompt and you do this, cd ... it takes you up a level. But if you just do cd ... it keeps you in the same place. Dot is an alias for your current working directory. So if I did dir ... it would do a directory of everything up above my current working directory. But if I do dir ... it'll just take a directory of my current directory, like that.
I mean, in that case, do you even need the dot?
Not for dir,
Yeah.
no. But if I'm invoking a function that requires a directory specification and it won't accept, an empty string as it, then passing in dot's a good way to do it. But we have this fancy way of getting our current working directory out, so I'm just going to use that throughout. Okay, so my directory is equal to cwd. I'm just changing its name to dir, and it looks like that is a keyword, or excuse me, a function, because I'm overriding it because it's purple. I hadn't noticed that before. And the extensions that I want to look for are py. You know what a file extension is. I want this code to find every file name that has the extension of py. Now the code we're going to write is not going to be super duper. It would be really neat if we could put an asterisk in there and it would match everything. This does not support wildcards. If we want to support wildcards, it's a considerably different thing that we would be doing. But okay. Alright. Now to do the next couple of parts, I'm going to use what we talked about as being list comprehension. Let me show you what list comprehension does again, because it's been, half a semester since I did it. I'm just going to delete this stuff, so don't type this in. But I'm going to make a list that's got some numbers in it. There's my list. I want to shorten that list, or make another list that consists of only the even numbers. So E for even. So what I do is I say that I want this to be every element, for every element in my list, if E modulus 2 is equal to 0. And I'm going to put that part in parentheses, although it's not strictly necessary, just to make sure that you see what's going on there.
That looks pretty weird.
So what this is going to do is it's going to build another list. And like I said, don't type this unless you just feel compelled to. Of only the even numbers. I didn't print the list out, so it doesn't prove a darn thing, right? So print E. That's called list comprehension. Not quite sure why. There we go. So it got my even numbers out of it. So that's a pretty neat way of modifying a list. Here is our original list, right? L is our original list. Here is the syntax that pulls the elements out of the list. Here's our if condition. That if condition could be a function. We could write a function that checked the data for something to see if it was evenly divisible by 2 or if it was a prime number or something like that. And then we just put that there. If you wanted to, this could also be a function. I don't want to mess it up too much, but you could do that. And then the list would be, you know, okay, I can't help it. Define fun that takes a variable and it returns x times 2. So now when we build this, you see that? We got double our values. So this part can be a function, and this if clause can be a function. And admittedly, that's a weird syntax, and I do not believe the book talks about it. I'm going to take this out because that was a little bit, you know, no reason to make it harder than it already was. The last thing you could do is if you reassigned it back to itself like that, it just loses the old list, and now our new list contains those contents. And I'm going to take advantage of that when we're getting a list of files. 822, 44, 100. So you see what I did. I extracted a subset of the list for every item that meets that condition. If you don't like these E's, you know, which I used for element, you could do this, if that makes it easier to read. Okay, I'm going to comment this stuff out so it's still in our notes. I'm going to call it list comprehension. All right, why am I talking about that? Because I'm going to get a directory listing, and then I want to be able to filter it so that only files that match our extension are in it. So we have our operating system library. We're going to call a function in it. So L, which is our file list, is equal to OS, operating system, dot scandir, and I want to pass in my current working directory, which I could have just done as CWD rather than reassign it as dir. Then let's just print out L. It's going to be a pretty lengthy list because I have a lot of files in my directory. If you put every day in its own, well, never mind. I goofed that. Forget that. We're not ready to print it out yet. What does it say that it is? When I printed out L, it said that's a scandir iterator, meaning that in order to get the data out, we're actually going to have to iterate through it, which we could do. I feel like doing that. So for L, nope. For E, standing for element, in L, print out E. I'm going to wind up deleting those two lines, but for now I want to see. All right, see what it's showing me? It's showing me that that list, or actually that iterator, is a whole bunch of things. A directory entry and a file name. So this is a list of objects at this point, except it's not strictly a list. It's an iterator, and there's a difference between the two. Okay, so there we go. We have our code here, except I'm going to delete those two lines. I only want file names that match my extension. So I'm going to use list comprehension rather than write a while loop. I could write a while loop, but I'm not going to. Maybe I should write a while loop so that you can compare the two. But L is equal to a list containing these objects. Remember, I'm using E for element. I could also use the word item. So E for every element in list if, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in parentheses again. C or Java have it. If E dot name dot ends with parentheses our extension. Now there's probably a way to query each one of these elements to specifically get the index, the extension out. And the reason I mention that is that this is also going to trigger on if you have any files without extensions that end in PY. Like, if you have for some reason, you have that as a file name with no extension. Now we tend not to create files with no extensions in Windows, but Mac users love to create files without extensions. And then they won't upload to D2L, and they text me asking why D2L is broken. So, and it's not your fault, it's D2L's fault for not accepting files without extensions. Okay, so there we go. At this point, this should be a list of files that only match our extension. And what I've done in previous classes is I've had people download a whole bunch of JPEGs and then make the extension JPEG. That might be fun, but I want to journey on a little bit more. This is not really adequate for our purposes because we should also check to see if these are directories or not. There are two kinds of items in a directory, right? There are files and then there are subdirectories.
Could you change the extension to be .py?
Yeah, that would be a better thing to do. If I made this .py, then it would rule out that Snoopy business. So.
And most directories.
Yeah, most directories. Yeah, you can make a directory that has a period in it, but
like, why would you do that?
right. Okay, so it's not doing anything because I haven't printed out our list of files yet. And I could do that. I could write that loop again. But instead, I want to just extract all the file names out of this list. So here I go. FN for file names. And yes, I'm being a horrible programmer, and I'm bringing shame to my ancestors by using such bad, variable names. Is equal to e.path for every e in the list. Now I'm not putting an if clause here because I want to get the path of every item in that list now. We could combine this actually into one statement if we wanted to, and I don't know why I didn't think that. I think it's just because I wanted to give you several illustrations of list comprehension. If I took this code here and I copied it and I pasted it right there, then I could delete that. But I think this is good enough. And now let's print out our list of file names. And there we go. That worked. So what is this rigmarole actually doing? When we do this L is equal to os.scandir, it's not returning a list of strings, it's returning a list of file entries. And file entry is an object, a class file entry. When we printed it out, we saw those words. And then we winnowed it down, but then we wanted to get just the names out. And so for every file entry, we call .path on it. And we could find out what the other member variables are for those file entries, if we so chose. But path is a good one. Maybe extension is in there. Now, given that we have a little bit of time left, what I want to do is I want to modify the code so it prints in a nice menu format where everything has a number, and then it offers to launch that file. Let's give this a shot. I'm going to delete that printfn. I probably should walk around at this point. All right, so adding the little command here to print the list of file names makes it work properly, but I am going to remove that because I actually want to display it in menu form, where it says 0, 1, 2, 3. It's just a list, so I can iterate through it by its list number, by its index value. Now here's what I don't want to do. So don't type this. For in in file names and then print out in, because that's only going to give us a file names. It's not going to give us an iterated list with index numbers. So instead, I want to use an index counter with a range statement. For I in range up to the length of fn. And then I can print out I, comma, fn subscript I to get that entry out. Print I, comma, fn subscript I. Now that's going to give us a nice little list of files. Now for those of y'all with only one file in it, that's all it's going to say is 0. If you wanted to, you could throw some more files in, but don't have to. Now let's ask the user which file they want to open. So choice is equal to the int version, int parentheses, of input, parentheses, open which file number, question mark, end quote, to end parentheses. I just combined it into one statement, right, rather than doing a print and then an input and then a conversion at int. All right, and here's what we're going to do. We want to launch that file. And so, we could do this, but we're going to fix it. os.system, and by the way, I'm not so sure this is going to work for you Mac users. I'll be really curious. If you've done any C++ programming, you know what the system call does. We always use system parentheses pause in order to, get the screen to, to sit there and wait a while.
You didn't define CMD.
You're right, you're right. Whatever CMD is, where was I going with that? Like if this was dir, it should run a directory. If it was, I want to run notepad.exe, it should launch Notepad. As a matter of fact, I feel like seeing if that works. I'm just going to type in notepad.exe, os.system, parentheses, notepad.exe. Now, is this really what we want? Not really, but I'm just testing it. I'm just illustrating to y'all. What the system call does is it uses the operating system to launch whatever command you said. And it launched Notepad just like I wanted it to. But I want it to launch the file. And I don't necessarily want to use Notepad to launch the file. If it's an executable, I actually want to run it. This is most of the solution right here. Let's build our command. Command is equal to our file name list subscript choice. CMD is equal to fn square brace choice. And then let's execute that command. This is not the perfect solution, but it's getting there. I'll give you a spoiler. This doesn't work on file names with spaces in it. I wish I had fewer files in there. Anyways, okay, so if I want to open file number 13, it ran it. You didn't get to see it, but it launched it as, a Python file and ran it, because that's what my py extension does on this. I haven't configured the py extension to do anything else except run Python. If we wanted to, we could make it open that file instead. So let's change CMD to look like this. I'm going to change this line here. CMD is equal to, quote, notepad.exe, end quote, or space, plus, okay, notepad.exe, space, end quote, plus that file name. And it'll launch Notepad to open up the file that we specify. Let me run it. I did some big talk. I want to make sure it works. All right, and there it goes. It opened whatever file I specified, just like I typed it into the command prompt. The only problem with what I've got here is that, like I said, if the file name had a space in it, it wouldn't work. I would have to enclose this choice here with quotes in order to get it to work. And what do I mean? If I'm here and I try to open a file that has an extension in it, or that has a space in it, Notepad, I can't do my space file.txt, but I can do Notepad quote my space file.txt. So to get this to work perfectly, I would need to put quotes around this. And I could do that. I'm going to use a single quote though, because I'm already using double quotes here as my, the delimiter for my string. So I'm going to put a single quote there. That's an apostrophe followed by a double quote. And then at the end of it, I need to add another apostrophe. So I'm going to use double quote, apostrophe, double quote. And that's about where we're going to stop. Type in my file number. It should launch it with Notepad. If you didn't want it to launch Notepad, if you just wanted to run it, you would just delete this part, right? I don't want to run it with Notepad. I want to actually execute my file. Oh, and the last thing we should have done is to prevent it from trying to launch directories. To do that, you would modify your list comprehension a little bit to do e.is_file. That differentiates it from a directory. Guess what you do to check to see if it's a directory? is_dir. Why not do that here as well? But then I'm going to have to walk around and do, make sure everybody's doing okay. I don't want to do that. I don't want to make it any more complex. Just know that you can check to see whether it's a file or a directory by calling, e.is_file or e.is_directory. Now I'm deleting that. Now if we had time, we would combine this with another, another utilization of files. We would open the file and read in all the characters and do something, maybe build a histogram of, all the words in the file. That's kind of fun, but we are out of time. Let me make sure it works. For me. Alrighty. Launches that file. Great.
Oh, that's I can't launch mine because my directory has a space in it.
Neat.
The folder that my
Right.
work is in is script space programming.
Has it been working up to this point though? Or has it never returned a list?
Well, when I would use the notepad, it worked. But when I set it to, when I removed the notepad and all the quotations, to just run the command.
Then what you would want to do then is do, and nobody else do this, like that.
No.
All right, let me make a Dropbox for this, and I'll do some walking around, make sure that everybody who wants to have it working has.
File name, director name, or volume label syntax incorrect.
Ew. How about if you just did this then? That should have done the same thing though.
Yeah. Okay, I'll
Right, Dropbox time.
yeah, let's see.
J. Please, if you made these in two separate files, I don't think anybody did, please upload both of them. All right, there's a Dropbox J. Print out your command before you actually execute it. Let's just see what you're trying to execute. Anybody got any typos? Okay.
I think this is wrong.
Let's put a space after notepad. .exe. Let's just, I'm going to move it push it over short. I wonder. Let's give that a shot.
There it is.
Okay. That's
Right.
interesting. But yeah.
Okay.
Is it running? Well, print out the CMD. So right before you do os.system, just print out CMD. That ought to work. And you tried it with Notepad in front of it, or it did work with Notepad?
Yeah, it did work
Okay.
with Notepad.
Well, that's moronic.
Yeah, so I think when you use Notepad to open it, Notepad recognizes it with spaces,
Right.
but then like the command prompt that it tries to run it with doesn't.
Okay, this is really dumb. But add CMD, go to your double quote and type CMD space.
Okay.
Yeah. It did execute it even if you don't see the results. So you see what it's doing? It's using the command line interpreter to execute the file that you specified.
Okay, and it's yes.
But
Yeah.
it didn't exit when it was done. So that's pretty lame. But I mean, I think we're still maybe stuck in the command line interpreter. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, so that means so now this is a command line.
Right.
And so I could run
The IR. So, yeah.
I'm just running the script in the script
Yep,
in
yep.
the command prompt.
Yeah.
Alright, perfect.
Okay, that's pretty nuts, but that's an interesting problem. When I've had to do things like that, I wrote a batch file, which
Yeah, that makes sense.
you know, you could use to launch it. But even then, if you were trying to launch that bat file and the directory path had a space in it, I'm not sure how that would work. I'll have to consider that.
Oh, so for the project, my idea was to do the Pokemon battle system. Would that work?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I took the notepad and
Sure. And it ran it and then closed it immediately. We didn't get to see it run.
so how do we make it all?
Well, what you could do is run a file that had a final input statement in it. So if we have an April 11, yeah, and April 10, there we go. So it's like that one. So try running 5 next time. You're just gonna have to hit, quit. Right now we just wrote a different part of the program. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so. Well, we haven't done it yet. Open the file number. Is that 4 or 5? I can't read. It's 5. Okay. So let's type in 5 and let's see if it launches it. And I'm not seeing it actually execute, but we see this command prompt popping up, which means that we're just pretty close. I would just change it back to Notepad for now. Yeah. Notepad space. Yeah, let's add the space there.
And you're one here.
It also left our command interpreter open. If you close Notepad, let's see if it closes that window. Here's Notepad. Yeah, let's close that. Nope, not that one. Let's close Notepad. And it got rid of the command prompt at that point.
Okay, so just I need the space on.
Yeah, we had to separate the Notepad command from the file name.